都已经坏了，你修了也没有用。对呀，对。都已经坏了，你修了也没有用。对呀，对。都已经坏了，你修了也没有用。对呀，对。都已经坏了，你修了也没有用。对呀，对。都已经坏了，你修了也没有用。对呀，对。
4, 3, 2. Hello everyone, welcome to Beyond the Labour Festival. My name is Simon.
Hi, and I'm Sherman.
Okay, yeah, and thanks for joining us tonight for this panel discussion. We have 3 esteemed guests. In time to come, I'm going to introduce them. The panel today will be what is a life worth living? And I'm now going to briefly introduce our guests here. We have Dr. Chong Po Heng, right? He's a Vice Chairman of Singapore Hospice Council. We have Ms. Ranga Nayaki. She's the Deputy Executive Director of Beyond Social Services. And we have Dr. Daniel Fong. He's Chairman, Medical Board, Institute of Mental Health. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We would, just feel free to send in your questions, your text messages. It's a very, very casual conversation. The topic that we want to talk about today is what is a life worth living? And we want to juxtapose it against this rising mental health condition. If we look at the data from 2016 Singapore Mental Health Study, 1 in 7 Singaporeans have a mental health condition. And back 6 years ago in 2010, right, it was 1 in 8. So it is quite a significant rise. And more importantly, 75% of the people do not seek help. So mental health condition is a very multifaceted issue. We can look at mental health conditions from patient, from care. We can look at it also from high risk groups, perhaps people who are aging, people who have illnesses, and also people receiving social support. Today, we are very honored to have 3 esteemed guests with us. They come from different walks of life, with different professions, and we are trying to look at these mental health issues, right, from different perspectives. First, let me invite them to briefly introduce themselves and maybe share a bit of what they do. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Simon. My name is Ho Heng. I am from the Singapore Hospice Council. I hold the post of Vice Chairman of the Council, but actually in my day job, I am the Medical Director of HCA Hospice Care. And what's this all about? I actually lead a team of doctors, nurses, and social workers to look after people who want to live and die at home. So all of these clients of us actually have advanced terminal illness, and they actually have got less than a year to live. And my teams go out to their homes to ensure that while they're living, they live as well as possible until they are ready to die.
So Ho Heng, I just want to kind of get the gist of what you say, right? You're helping people to die.
I'm helping people to die well.
Die well.
They will die anyway because of their terminal illness.
Yes.
But they have chosen to die at home with everybody they love in a place where they have stayed in for the longest time. And we're just there to sort of guide them along and support alongside and until the end comes.
Yeah, and yes, and you have made a very important point, right? Every one of us dies, but how do we help people to die well?
Exactly.
And this is something that I just only a few years back I came across this, and the term they use is palliative care. Am I right?
Exactly.
Okay,
yes,
good.
Yes.
So
I hope to talk more about it later.
Yeah. Good. Send in more of your questions if you have, right? And this is something new to me also. Only just a few years back, I learned that actually palliative care is also a very important aspect of the whole healthcare system. Good. Maybe Dr. Daniel Fang?
You skipped the lady.
Yeah, because I think just now.
Usually ladies first, but sure.
Yeah, maybe
I'd like to introduce myself.
have her. Give her.
We leave the best for last.
Yeah, that's right. Hi, I'm Daniel Fang. I'm a psychiatrist. Chairman Medical Board, IMH is a long term. So actually, I'm just the chief psychiatrist of the hospital. Actually, in my work, I'm a child psychiatrist. So I work with kids and their families. So I see adults too, but usually the adults who look after the children. Personal life, I have 5 kids. I just became a grandfather 2 days ago, so that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, congratulations.
And that gives me a little birth for life, which we can talk about later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Daniel, thank you so much. Ms. Ranga?
Oh, hi, I'm Ranga. I'm in my day job, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Beyond Social Services. And our key focus is families, children and young people living in 1 and 2 room rental flats. So I'm sitting between 2 doctors. I don't have a doctor title. I'm a social worker. And I loved working in Beyond for the longest time. It's been about 18 years, where the focus has been on strengths. So we come across many families that are way below livable wages, I would say, which is not defined in Singapore. But we start our work by first and foremost looking at their strengths, and then we can help them. Because I think when people come into social services, we begin to judge them for the problems that they are facing, then you can't help them. So the first thing that attracted me to Beyond Social Services and that has kept me there for the longest time is that everyone has a story to tell, and they have led more amazing lives than I could have, given the challenges that they have. And over the years, I think it has just, it's just empowered many, many people. And so it's not from the professional giving the community strength. Within the community, they find strengths and they begin to reflect on each other. So that has been fantastic, and I really love what we are doing, and more people have joined us. I think we can't do this job without volunteers. So many people who take the view of helping families from a strengths perspective have joined us, and that has really created a community of care.
Yeah, we will come to that very soon. Okay, both as a grandparent, what gives you that joy in life, and also as your work coming from a community perspective. My name is Simon, and
I'm Sherman.
Sherman, we are from Happiness Initiative. Happiness Initiative is a social enterprise, right, that translates the science around happiness and well-being into actions that people can take. So, if you're interested to find out more about what we do, just go and check us out. And today, uh, what we are very fascinated about is something that happened maybe at the start of this millennium. There was a shift in a focus in psychology from treating pathology, right, to building strength. And I think this movement later came to be called positive psychology, right? And what I was looking at, and I'm trying to see how this movement has influenced how we do treatment as well. I think maybe in the mental health scene, we can look at it from two frameworks. One framework is what's wrong, let's treat it. Another framework is what's right, let's strengthen it. Okay, so what is your view, right, on these two frameworks, maybe in the mental health scene or also in your work?
Okay. Maybe
Anyone?
I can let Daniel
Sure.
first then.
Okay, I'd like to start because
Yes.
I think we need to clarify some of these dimensions, that terms that we use. I know that we use the word mental health condition. First of all, I like to say
Yeah.
there is mental illness, disease, disorders, mental health conditions. We call them this to depict actually an illness, a disease, a pathological state that is very often associated with brain pathology. And that's why we use treatments. We use evidence-based treatments, as doctors do. When you have doctors, they come up with a reductionist diagnosis, and then they have drugs and medications, right? So that's one framework. You just said it. 1 in 8. Previously, 1 in 7. Sorry, previously 1 in 8. Then
now
1 in 7. Actually, in the world, mental health conditions or mental disorders is about 1 in 5, right? So it's not that bad.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one. But that only happens to you in your lifetime, 1 in 5. So 20% of people actually have mental health conditions. What about the rest of us? That's where that term, mental health, is important. Mental health is a dimension, pervades the entire population.
Yeah.
We all have mental health issues, distress, problems. Some of it requires counseling, support. Some of it requires self-coping capabilities. We use new terms now, resilience, strengths, same concept. So mental health is all of life. The World Health Organization defined health as not merely the absence of disease or infirmities, but a state of well-being,
Yeah.
complete. So
Yeah.
mental health is also that same thing. That state of well-being affects all of us, and we all have it. So, so therefore, the two is a bit separate.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep it that way. So if you see a doctor, and particularly if you see a psychiatrist, you'll be treating only that 20% or less,
Yeah.
probably less, 10%, because the rest of the other doctors, like Po Heng, will be treating the others. So,
Okay. Yeah. So, thanks, Daniel, for kind of like maybe setting this stage. There is this mental health conditions that we're looking at, pathology, but yet there's also this broader spectrum. Generally, we just talk about mental health, right? And out of so, am I right to say that everyone else, mental health is a term that's applicable to everyone else?
correct.
Am I
So
right?
the one thing that differentiates from sort of good mental health
Yeah.
versus, say, mental health problems or
Yeah.
distress is the stress.
Yeah.
It's the way we cope with the world around us.
Okay.
Now, stress is different to different people.
Yeah.
I mean, stress to me could be, my shirt's not right, my hair's not black, I have no hair.
Thank you.
Yeah, as one of those issues. But it could also very well be, I'm getting married tomorrow. I'm going to talk. I'm getting an award. Stress is different to different people,
Yeah.
and how we cope with it is a mental health issue.
Yeah.
If you don't cope well,
Yeah.
what happens? You're unhappy.
Yeah.
Unhappiness is not clinical depression. On the illness side of things, depression and unhappiness are quite separate.
Yeah.
But in our daily lingo, we tend to get confused.
Mm.
So you say, I'm
Yes.
depressed, because my dog died.
Yeah.
Actually, that may not be depression per se.
So I think what we may want to understand is if people meet diagnostic criteria, okay, then they will consider having a mental health condition. Am I right?
Well, I mean, like I said, diagnosis is unfortunately not very precise.
Okay.
It's not like COVID-19. But even then, for COVID-19, you do a PCR test and you say, okay, positive. And there's a group that actually comes in between. I'm not sure. So even diagnosis is not very clear. I mean, I think more importantly, I use 5 criteria to decide if something is a condition. The symptoms need to be severe. They need to be persistent. They need to be pervasive in all situations, and it needs to impair functioning to some degree. I get a bit worried when people tell me I'm kind of high functioning illness. Then it's a problem. So we have to think carefully when we're going to say high functioning. Then the last bit is how appropriate it is. Like I said, my dog died. I feel very sad.
Yeah.
I could feel sad for a whole week. Does that make me depressed? Not necessarily. Probably not.
Okay, good. So I think we will come to the other guest, right? And we will come back to you again, right, on this, because the strength base, what I was thinking is, so if we look at mental health, if we just focus on mental health, we may have a group of people who may have poor mental health and eventually suffer from mental health conditions. Yeah. Would that be a more accurate?
So I'm very careful.
Yeah.
And I say this because a lot of people assume that this is a continuity between mental health and mental illness or disorders. I don't entirely agree. I think there is a little gap between the two, that at severe mental health, that means I can be very unhappy and I have a mental illness, or I can be not unhappy and still have a mental illness.
Yes.
They're not necessarily dimensionally the same. So we draw this dimensional thing, unfortunately, makes it seem, I draw it like think of a triangle, right? We call it the pyramid, but think of a 3-dimensional pyramid. There are 2 phases. One phase is the mental illness phase. The other phase is the mental health phase. At the back, you say, what's the back? The back is what I call the mental sickness phase. Now, this is a new term. What is sickness? Sickness is what society attributes to us. So when you have COVID-19, there is a pathology. When you are tested positive, you become, having that pathology, and then, the symptoms are very different. Some of you with COVID-19 have no symptoms.
Yeah.
Some of you with COVID-19 gets a very bad chest infection to the stage that you almost die, or you could die.
Yeah.
And yet, what happens? Once you're tested positive, you're put into isolation, quarantine. That's the back phase of that pyramid. The back phase is stigma and sickness. The best example of mental health conditions today that is stigmatized is what leprosy was in the past. A physical illness that was caused by an infection. And what have we done with that? We've put it aside. So beware of that third phase. But I put you mental health and mental illness up front for discussion.
Okay, good. We will see. Let's send in your questions if you have any questions, right? And we will come back to Daniel very soon, yeah? Okay, so if we look at a strength approach, if we take a strength approach versus, what's wrong, a problem approach, what's wrong, and let's treat it. And in your work, in your line of work, right, do you see that there are these two frames that you could actually look at how you see things, or in your line of work?
Yeah. So I think it's not an either or.
Yeah.
So the doctors are extremely important. So when it comes to mental illness, I think there is a need for medication, there is a need for attention, and for people to be around you, to be able to support you as you go through that illness, right? So I think where the strengths-based approach comes in is not to define people by their illness. So we come across a lot of people in the low-income communities, whether they are older people or families, they've gone through major life transitions. So it could have been illness, it could have been incarceration, it could be losing a child, they go through extreme levels of stress. But you do see some people bounce back because they've had a lot of people around them, people that they could rely on, people in the similar situation, and they tend to become a lot more hopeful in life. But if there is a mental condition, so we've come across women who have just given birth and then they go through the postnatal depression, we would still put that community support around them and help them to remember who they were before that postnatal depression, right? So they were maybe great cooks, they were really great mothers, taking care of their other children. So the community rallies around them, reminds them of their strength and, continue to, support them, but they will still need that support from the medical professionals. So I think it's not an either or. And most importantly, I think the key thing is that as a society, as a community around, we remove that stigma. So people may behave in a very irrational manner at certain points in time to somebody who has not ever experienced it before, but we don't define them by that. We need to be able to give opportunities. So I think strength then allows you to give opportunities that people can excel in. So that's how I see it. So it's an ongoing cycle of positive reinforcement. And when you have that relationship, you can help them to make the right decisions of seeking medical help, of seeking the right kind of support they need when they fall through the crack. I think that's how I see the strength approach to be.
Yeah. And sometimes when you use a strength approach, right, it gets people, you put people less on the defensive, and they can be more open to eventual treatment or eventual help. Is that something that you see in your work?
Yes, kind of. So, we've made it a process within Beyond, right? So we would draw a genogram. So somebody is affected, so we draw a genogram to see who are their parents, who are their children, who are the people in their family who can help them. But we often go through a period where we talk about who are they, and not just defining them by the problem, right? So I think when you do that, yes, it gives them more space. So the space is very important, the physical, emotional, spiritual space as well, to be able to look at where they are. So I think I do see that there's more fresh air. If you look at opportunity as fresh air, there's more fresh air for the person to be able to, see themselves, see how other people see them, and recover from that. Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll come back. Yeah. Bo Heng, how if at all, right? How is the strength-based approach applicable in helping in the work that you do?
Okay, I can only speak, from my perspective, doing palliative care, looking after patients who've got terminal illness.
Yes.
I really like the way, Daniel mentioned about the three-dimensional sort of approach. Yeah, the three phases of an attitude. Right?
Yeah.
So in hospice care, which is really very much about a person-centered care sort of philosophy, we look at the person more than the illness alone. So therefore, I suppose I can also offer three different dimensions, which is about the body, the head, and the heart.
Okay.
So we have a body that is ravaged by a terminal illness, which is incurable, where everybody says, I've got nothing else I can do for you.
Okay.
Either that or the person suffers from end organ failure. It just means that the lungs or the liver or the heart or the kidneys are not working as well anymore, either because of age or some other illness. They have no other chances of actually seeking any treatment to actually reverse the process that is long past the so-called treatable stage. So then if you have a body that is breaking down, what else can you make the person whole? So in the work that we do, it is about bringing the person together again, even though one of the three components are actually breaking down irreversibly. And that's where we go to the head, and that's where we go to the heart. So when we bring our sort of package of care, I like to think that we focus quite a lot on helping the person strengthen himself at the cognitive level. So we use lots of things like finding purpose, finding meaning in life. And this is really very much, I suppose, inspired by the work done by Viktor Frankl. Years ago. I think a lot of our viewers online would have read his book, Man's Search for Meaning. So logotherapy is just this school of thought where we do a lot of searching with the patient or even the family caregivers who are struggling to understand, why is my dad dying? Why is my child dying? Because I also look after children who are dying and helping them to die well. And that's one way we help. And so looking at the heart level, it is about focusing on spirituality, aspects of the person. So we do a lot of work and also inspired yet by another psychiatrist, Dr. Harvey Chorchinoff from Canada. He actually talked a lot about using dignity, bringing back what the patient used to own in a legacy work that we do with our patients and even with those who are not dying yet. So then remind them that they actually have achieved so much in their lives. They have left a legacy so worthy and so important to the people they are going to leave behind.
Yeah.
And we have this all recorded down and then left behind as a legacy.
Yeah.
So these are some of the other bits of work that we do at the heart level.
Yeah.
And the philosophy that we bring to our patients and families when we sort of see them at home, it's really about honoring them as a person, treating them in spite of the disease like a person, as if they are whole.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot about the touch, the attitude, and the spirit we bring to ensure that the person, despite something that's going down, something that's going south, something is not going to get better, can still be spiritually whole. So I think we also have three dimensions, but focusing more on the head as well as the heart to ensure that the person is whole once again before the person moves to another better place.
Yeah, and actually some of these themes that you talk about, like meaning, purpose, right, are themes that is synonymous in a strength-based approach, right? Yeah, and I would want to come back to Daniel. So would you see, right, a strength-based approach is applicable? I would think that it's very applicable to a mental, when we talk about a mental health perspective, if we look at mental health, right? How about having a strength-based approach in treating pathology? I'm not saying that it is not in, you do not look at the illness and see what's wrong and treat it. But while that is important in treating pathology, do you see any room where a strength-based approach could also kind of augment the kind of care?
Of course, I think that's very clear already from Po Heng's discussion. You know that it's you use the body, the head, and the heart, right? Or you could break it up, the biopsychosocial, which is what we traditionally use. What's biological needs its treatment, and illness needs its treatment. But some illnesses are terminal in nature. They just are part of that process. And there are many terminal illnesses, including, I suppose, aging. As we grow older, that's a terminal illness. But that's illness-based. I think the other parts of it, which I think is sometimes forgotten, is really the psychosocial. And Ranga mentioned this, and also the spiritual, and so did Po Heng. I think the spiritual dimension is sometimes not often talked about. And I think it's important. Actually, in particularly Asian psychiatry, we've focused a bit on the spiritual dimension about how that's important to people. And that's linked to strengths. Now, strengths is the way that we cope with life. If we have strengths, we cope better. And remember, when we cope better, it means we deal with the stresses better. So that's why it's important to have strengths. And like I said, you can be very unhappy with an illness, or you can be generally calm and collected with an illness, a terminal illness, nonetheless.
Wow, it's very insightful. So what I hear, right, is even as we have defined a pathology, mental health conditions, and we define mental health itself, right, yet a strength-based approach could be applicable in both of these dimensions, so to speak, right?
I'll jump in here. Even in pathology, I think in the course of my work, many people will think that people working in my line, are all depressed and really dark people and facing death all the time. But actually, I go to work very happy because I see actually, apart from people dying, which is a natural thing. It's not a terminal illness. People die. People age and die naturally. All of us have an expiry date. So, but when people die of a terminal illness, whether it's cancer or end organ failure, what I'm seeing is a lot of people actually demonstrating that they have got the resilience, they have got the resource, they have got what it takes to actually overcome suffering, which as somebody witnessing, we might see it as suffering, but what I'm seeing is a lot of this, I suppose, demonstration of that strength that I never thought people have, even as they are suffering from a terminal illness. And I think that's what is inspiring me. And I think we should, again, try to move away from medicalizing. I think the doctors do it all the time. Everything, whenever there's a label, like a disease or an illness, people will think about, okay, what do you need now? Is it Prozac or is it, and one of those wonderful drugs that the psychiatrist invents all the time. So I think it's important to we have a friendly rivalry.
We have a friendly.
I better get out of the way here
I would
now.
sense.
So can you feel the tension?
Yes, I'm
Okay, so
100%
anyway, as I was saying, not everything needs a drug.
Yeah.
So we often use a lot of non-pharmacological treatments in the process of actually managing our patients. And if somebody's in a lot of pain, I don't necessarily have to whip out my prescription pad to prescribe morphine or one of those strong drugs. Yeah. I can ask them to work on it, whether it's from a meaning-based perspective or from the spiritual realm, or maybe moving away from some of these high-order sort of perspectives to something more personal. How would you like us to work with your pain? How do you think your pain can be managed? What do you think this pain is all about? Is there some ways that you have always used to actually help yourself when you're in pain? And you will discover, and very interesting that children do it so well, and I'm sure Daniel will agree with me. So in the course of my practice, I do use a little bit of hypnosis. So what I do is I get the children to help themselves, and they actually control their pain, their breathlessness, their nausea, their vomiting, without a drop of medication. And that's what I would see as the obvious manifestation of the strength-based approach.
So I see three. I'm going to make a comment. Then Sherman will help me pick up some of the questions, right? I think Daniel also mentioned this, like it is a very holistic treatment because you have the biological thing that you have to focus on. There's a psycho and there's a social. So I think if all of these all can come together, right? My assumption is that it will be more, there's higher efficacy. Daniel, am I right to say that there's importance of drug? And I think there's also importance in the other forms to support the efficacy of the drug as well. What do you think?
No, I think so. I think that's very well shown in a lot of literature that, there is, let's put it this way, there's almost a, drugs have this placebo effect, which I'm always quite concerned about because it gives you belief. And if you study any intervention and you give someone something that they believe in, it can help them. So if that is indeed the case, then the belief itself is much more powerful than drugs itself. So of course, to debunk this publicly, sometimes people worry, right? But placebo effects affect up to 30%, of effects in general.
Thanks for pointing that out. That a placebo effect is an effect in itself, which is why a lot of pharmaceutical drug right here to work much better than a placebo. So Sherman, are there questions?
So I want to jump in because I think Bohin, you made an interesting point that one of the commenters on Facebook, Stefan, also mentioned that they say it may not actually be very useful to sort of medicalize mental health conditions, right? And it actually sometimes may be more harmful because it creates a divide, a sense of stigma against them. So what are your thoughts on that? So now I allow you to respond to this.
Well, I think you have to be balanced in this. And of course, don't now rush to see the psychiatrist because you want to clarify, is this a mental health condition or is this, generally just stress? I think the key thing is really we have to take a population-based approach. So everyone needs to understand what is a mental illness, get to know it better. It's what I call mental health literacy. After that, you then think about, when is it an illness and when is it not? If it's not an illness, what are the things that you can do for yourself? And that's where your strengths come in. Some of us are better at dealing with things than others, but we have other things, our support systems. I call it the 4 Fs, our friends, our family, having a sense of fun, and then looking forward to something called the future. Now, those 4 support systems give us hope and meaning and purpose. And I think that's important as a start. So
the 4 Fs, right, in case we miss it: friends, family, fun, and future. A sense of hope for the future, right? Okay,
for a moment, I thought he was going to say 4.
So now, if there are questions, I will let Sherman jump in, right? You see, we are talking about this strength-based approach when we are faced with a certain illness, a certain condition, right? We have to master them up. But do you think that we are doing enough before we even get that condition is our society doing enough to build strength? Are we doing enough to build strength before we get into that condition or before we get into that state? Because sometimes when we get into a certain condition, right, it may be more difficult for them to, to talk about strength. What are your thoughts on this?
Maybe I can share
Yeah.
something, right? So, we could always do more, I feel, because within the Singapore society, there's come to a point where everyone says I'm stressed.
Okay.
Everyone doesn't have time, and we struggle. And I think COVID came in, actually, it's a good reminder for us to look at what do we value, what do we believe in, and we can definitely do more. I do feel in being there for each other, looking out for people. So, the common example is that how we live in flats and we don't even pay any attention to our neighbors, right? Now I find that more people during COVID, the moments that we do get to go out, we are greeting people in the lift, we are actually at least, acknowledging even though we can't see our face. I think this is very important. So I think out of the 4 F's that we spoke about, to add to the family and friends as well as the future, you need to be seen and seen. If you don't witness other people, then they don't feel validated at all. So I make it a point. For instance, if I'm going in the MRT and I see somebody selling tissues, instead of just passing, like your money and taking the tissue and walking away, I always make it a point to make eye contact because I think they are so invisible. So when we talk about people who are on the margins of society due to various reasons, it could be poverty, it could be very many things, disability, illness, we must all make it a point in our lives to be able to look around and create a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about 4, right, there's a 4-quadrant circle of courage that we talk about, which is called a resiliency model for youth. And the first one is a sense of belonging. That I am seen and I can see and people look out for me. The next is actually I'm good at something, which is mastery. And the third is generosity. And the last is independence. So it forms a circle. So we were talking about shapes as well, prism, and I'm going to talk about a circle, right? So often when we gather for family dinners, when we gather with friends, the circle is a very important symbol that we are all equal. We are all in this together. And within that circle, we create a space for people to be good at something, to feel a sense of belonging. And I think if we make this a part of our culture, that we don't use terminology, we don't behave in a way that we shut off people who are not like us, then you'll be creating more inclusion. And when you do that, I do believe that it supports people who may be more and more stressed because you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know when you're passing somebody on the streets, what are they actually experiencing that day at that moment, right? So, there are many movements around the world. So this morning I was reading about Bank of Flowers. How they repurpose flowers and they make it into bouquets and they leave it at different places, right? Where people might go to when they're stressed. And you just find a random bouquet and the card says, pick it up, this is for you. Because this is from Bank of Flowers. Yeah. And it's being done in the UK. And I thought that was such an excellent idea. We throw away, a lot of things. But then when you repurpose it and somebody finds it in their moment of need, it's actually created a warm glow that somebody is looking out for me, right? So I think the more we create moments of positivity, opportunity, then people can respond to their stresses a lot better.
Yeah. And what I picked out is that one of the key things to build when we talk about this strength approach, right, is to build social support.
Yes.
Am I right to have picked it up?
That's what's crucial.
Yeah.
Friends and family for sure, right? And then there are people you may not actually draw into your life, but the uncle in the coffee shop. I have a favorite uncle in the coffee shop near my office, which I miss him, right? During COVID because I'm not going back to the office. And so we all have these loose connections. Okay. What we call these loose networks, which are also very important for us. Yeah. So the auntie in the market who sells you the vegetables, these are all very important because they know you, they know your pattern, they know your calendar, your schedule. Very, very important networks.
So I'm going to jump in here, right, to ask you to kind of push you some more and to ask, do we have a systematic approach to building strength among like people who need social service support?
Okay.
Yeah.
We study it in school. Whether we actually do it on the ground, actually it depends on person to person.
Okay.
So I'm afraid that social services has been medicalized a lot. So we do follow somewhat of a medical model. Okay. So when I was doing social work, the whole module on medical illness was something that I felt like it was like a junior doctor trying to try to understand, diagnose, right? And I'm thinking actually at the end of the day, I'm not qualified to diagnose. What I'd like to see is, of course, certain patterns of behavior that could indicate a mental illness, but what my focus should be is on how do I create the strength around them, right? So if we take the medical model of social work aside, that means we're not diagnosing and prescribing and even to that extent therapy and counseling is actually in the medical model. It is not to say that there's no need for it, there is a space for it. But I would actually say that we have to perhaps move away from making it central to social work. And now a lot of social, even the ministry is focusing on community building, community-based social work. And I think that is something that as social workers, we have to unlearn and relearn. Because if you don't unlearn the medical model of therapy and counseling, and you try to practice this, the lens that you wear is often, what is wrong, how can I fix it? But then you have to be able to look at what is right, how can I extend it, how can I strengthen it, right? So it's a journey. There are many conversations happening on it. I'm happy to be part of it. And I'm really grateful for volunteers who come in because they've not been schooled. In some sense, they've not gone through some kind of treatment model sometimes, and they come in really like, I want to help. And I just see this kid as a kid. But the school may see him as doesn't come to school refusal, there's a label. Whereas for volunteers, you're just a naughty kid, And then how do we work with that?
Yeah. So we can look at a kid, right, who doesn't come to school as, oh, this kid has a problem, school refusal issue, or we can look at this kid, oh, perhaps let's find what passion this kid would love,
Exactly.
would be engaged in. Maybe is there a way that we could have some more fun, where the kid could have a bit of fun, right? If the kid would enjoy having fun, having some friends, positive friends, that may maybe give that kid a lot more meaning to pursue. Daniel, what's your take on it? Yeah, I can see you wanted to say something.
Because there's so much I wanted to say.
Yeah, okay. Over to you.
No, because
The mic's yours.
in medical life, it's actually very downstream when problems arise.
Okay.
What you asked about is how can you go upstream?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Prevent problems. How can you strength-based approach? Actually, you can't teach that when problems are arising. When the stress is very great, I think it's more like first aid.
Yeah.
You're trying to band-aid the thing. You're trying to solve the issue on. What you need to do is to go upstream. One of my favorite quotes is from Desmond Tutu, or at least attributed to him, which is, "You should stop fishing people out the river and find out why they're falling in the first place." Because when we try to save people, we save them by fishing them out of the river. But what's making them fall in? And that's where this strengths-based approach. Now, I want to start with failure. Yes,
That's your fifth F, right? For today.
No, failure is a good way to go upstream. And if you want to ask me for a systematic way to teach our children from young, is to allow them to fail and fail successfully.
Wow.
Now these are of course quite difficult to conceptualize. It's very philosophical, but to fail successfully means that you can fail and still get up. You then become resilient. Now the best example, of course, is in games. We need to play more games. We need to be getting out there and play soccer. And tonight's Saturday, so I suppose there is some soccer going on. And it's a good thing. When you start to fail and you learn from those failures, it helps. But have we got a society that's ready for this? Perhaps not, because we push everyone. It's so hard to get. And the American solution sometimes is, you're very good. All of you are very, very good. Actually, you should start maybe sometimes saying, maybe we're not so good. We got some problems. But how do we get around this? How do we help? And that, the community is important. In healthcare, our Ministry of Health says very clearly, we're moving away from healthcare, medicalizing health.
The health.
We're moving away from hospitals to the community. We're moving away from quality. What's the best treatment we have? What's the best treatment for cancer? To value. What's really good value for you? What does it mean? And for us, some people say value is money, but it's not just. There's other things, right? That's valuable.
Wow, you have touched on something that maybe is going to bring us to another dimension, to education. And it's going to be very heated. I'm not sure how many comments is going to come in, right? Because you just mentioned that we have to fail, and we have to fail successfully. We need to create opportunities for like children, right, to fail, so that they are okay with failure, and eventually it builds resilience later in their life. And I'm not sure if there's any comments or any questions. Feel free to send them in, and Sherman will just jump in, right, if there are. But I'm going to pass the time now to you. What do you think about these? Uh, are your not patients? Are your professionals? Are your professionals, right, trained in this strength-based approach?
Oh, okay. Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I mean, I live and breathe, believing that every one of us actually has the capability to deal with our own problems.
Okay.
Except that we were not, either we've lost sight of some of these abilities or competencies, or we have not been directed by whether it's a guru or a palliative care physician like myself to help you see it or find it. So I think all the sort of training that we give to our junior doctors, nurses, as well as social workers involve helping to bring out what is strong in our clients, whether they are the patients themselves or the caregivers, and help to minimize what is, failing. And I think this is the best way to actually bring a person so whole together. Again, when everything is breaking down, when the person is losing one thing after another, whether it's their health, their ability to walk, and finally their life. So I think I just wanted to make a very quick comment on the discussion before you spoke about a system-based approach to strengthening. I like to think that it is also important, and that's what I've learned doing this business for the last 20 years, that every person is unique. So whilst you have a system to try to incentivize or motivate people to go back to where their strengths lie and see the positive, make themselves happy, I think we have to acknowledge that every one of us is different. We deal with our problems differently, and you might not have one cookie cutter approach to solve all problems in the world. That's one point. The second point is also about how pain and suffering is here. It's always there. It's in our lives, and it's just something that we have to deal with, and that's why we need to sort of normalize some of this, face it, develop the strategies, just like how Daniel says, fail by actually looking at the problem head on and discovering within yourselves what do you have to solve that problem. So there must be pain, then there must be panacea. There must be tears before you can have joy. They all come together. You cannot just go around looking for happiness and joy and imagine that you are in paradise, but that's so unreal. So I think this strengths-based approach that you're trying to sort of have people think about is very important to help us deal with the pain and suffering that exists in this world, and not really to just chase happiness. That's so unreal. That's so unreal.
So while this is so important, right, do you think that we are doing enough such that when people develop certain conditions, they are more ready? Because when they're having those conditions, like what you say, they need a band-aid. You cannot talk about strength at the moment when they need immediate help. But are we doing enough, from when you look at your patients, right? Are we doing enough at a system level such that when they maybe eventually develop the condition and they need palliative care, they are more ready?
I don't think so. This is just from my personal experience. So most of my patients come to me reluctantly. Despite me thinking that I do a great job in hospice and palliative care, because I like to think that I help people to sort of do their last journey very well, smoothly, and then when they go, anybody else, whether it's themselves or the people they left behind, have no regrets, right? So I think I do a very good job. But all my patients and caregivers come to me very unhappily because somebody tells them, you need to go and see the hospice and palliative care physician. You have no more hope.
That's right.
It's the end. So I think the whole system needs to kind of change and recognize that all of us live and all of us die. It's just another chapter in our life. And I think that my own experience just demonstrates that we haven't quite grappled with what's life, what's normal, and what is inevitable. And therefore start thinking about how you can manage it, deal with it. And that's why there's a huge movement in our circle about advanced care planning. But I think it's much bigger than that. It's about embracing life in itself with its up and down. And maybe later on, it might go down. But going down doesn't mean it's going down south, but actually it's finishing this chapter and moving to a much better one, I think.
And having that sense of meaning and giving them a legacy to leave behind.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
You want to say something?
No. I was just I was listening to, and I like that. I think maybe we should tell people not just to live well, but to leave well. And, and maybe the word die is stigmatizing. And people don't like to hear that.
I think that's
unfortunately.
Leave, L-E-A-V-E, right? To leave well.
Live well and leave well.
And when you ask, are we doing enough, right?
Yeah.
It is not the professionals maybe have to do more, but it starts with our families and the kind of environment we live in. So I think the failure part is very important. Actually, we're thinking of organizing a conference of failures.
Conference?
Because failures, right?
Okay.
Because I think we stigmatize failure. And we are on this smooth track in Singapore really. I mean, if you're a more or less okay family, you study, you go to the best schools, it just goes on like that, right? And then getting the condo is maybe the end of your aspiration. But I really think that we need to celebrate failure and have space for failure. So that's up to the family and the environment.
Yeah, there are questions that's coming in, right?
So I just want to add one other comment by Yifeng. I think he's asking what is some lessons that you learn in the work through the years of the work you do with the clients, and maybe share some personal experiences or stories that you feel what led you to feel the way you do now. Yeah, maybe for anyone of you.
Yeah, and the next question we'll take is Maybelline Tan, right? We'll come to that, okay, Maybelline? Yeah.
I thought maybe I
Any
just
personal
start by
story?
saying, I remember this very vividly. So I have got a 9-year-old girl who's dying from a very rare cancer. And her father had a very beautiful conversation with her just weeks before she died. So she asked her father, Pa, why must I go through this? Why must I die before you? So I would be quite disturbed by that conversation, and I would struggle to find an answer to respond to my own daughter, right? And guess what he said? You're a very lucky girl. When you die, you have Papa, Mama, and everybody else here with you. All of us love you so much, and we are with you right till the end. But when Papa dies, I've got nobody else with me. You will not be there anymore, and I'm not even sure whether Mom will be there. And I'll be all alone. So I suppose I'm not sure whether everybody gets that whole atmosphere that exists in that room. It was very impactful to me as a professional with years of experience to hear such a clever, delicate conversation happening in the midst of suffering. So this was a girl who had so much pain, and I was having problems managing her. But yet there can be so lovely things happening in that little rental flat in the middle of little India. And it's so vivid to me even today. And I share this all the time with people. Even when you think there's no more hope, even when there's so much pain and suffering, you can have so beautiful things happening. And this is so empowering to the girl. After she heard that, she never slept as well as that particular night, right, for weeks. Because she was so reassured, and she could find meaning and purpose for why this is happening to me.
So that's how you leave. Very, very beautiful and very heartbreaking. For me, I can't think of one person, Sherman. I think when you ask what is an experience, it's like a composite of different people that come to mind. And I'm very, very touched by many young people who struggle through their lives. And it's almost like when you say it's not a straight line, it's like this, right? You go through problems and down. I think in the teenage years, it's really like a very, very fast heartbeat. And when they come back, when they are in their late teens, maybe even up to mid-20s, and they still look like the children that we know, except that they are bigger and they're taller. But they come back with this shy smile and say, I wish I had listened, but I'm back. And they've gone through so much, and actually I draw strength from that, because that to me is the resilience. So I can, in my mind, there's so many people that is flashing through my mind right now. And similarly, people who are dying as well, who leave behind people with very little resources, and how do the children come through it? So we've seen little children being parentified because they were younger siblings, So people like that, I think there's so much to learn. So we've stopped using, despite their challenges, people are strong.
Yeah.
It's because of their challenges that they're strong, and we all have a lot to learn from it.
Example? Well, I suppose a lot of people like to think that being a doctor is a great thing because you can do curing of diseases and so forth. I think I'll tell you from a very personal viewpoint, in my career, which started in 1990, I lost 8 of my patients that I cared for over time. They have killed themselves. And suicide to the doctor is at least to the psychiatrist, is a failure on our part. Do I look into myself and say, what a lousy psychiatrist I've been, that I've allowed 8 children to die in my care? Or do I turn around and say, look, how can I do it better so that I can continue to take care of others that come before me? And I like to think that doctors and physicians and the helping professions, we actually are like coaches, helping someone in their journey. Our job is to help them take that journey and do that, and try their best in that journey together. So we don't live their lives for them, we don't solve their problems, but we help them to solve their problems. And we look for their strengths.
Yeah.
Which I think
Wow, thanks for all these powerful stories, right? There is a question from Maybelline, and I think if we could bring that up to the screen, I wonder how psychotherapy will be much more effective along with taking medication for mental illness patients.
Well,
Yeah, so I think obviously it's directed at you, right, Daniel?
Well, I mean, when we approach illness, we certainly very often would combine the two.
Yeah.
The only problem I think in our fast-paced world is people will say psychotherapy is talking cure, right? It's talking to someone and learning about your life and your past and how it's affected you today.
Yeah.
Now that requires time. You need to spend time. You need to put in time. Unfortunately, many people today want a quick fix. So give me the cutting edge medicine because I just take it in, right? I mean, yeah, of course we can talk about our pain, but then if you got a pill, then I'd rather take the pill. Now, how that works, of course, is hard to say, but my personal thing is, I completely agree. Psychotherapy is very effective, and in many situations, you don't need anything else if you have a mental illness.
Yeah.
But people, they want one or the other rather than both.
Yeah, and I think now what we really need is time, because we all also started that. What COVID had taught us is to give us time, to look back at what really truly matters to us. I have never spent so much time with my dog, right? And we really bonded. I fostered the dog like maybe a year ago, and during this COVID period, we truly bonded, and it only happened really because of the time.
Yes.
And as with even treating illnesses, we also need time.
And this is also related to a question someone else asked Sen Yang about how then do you equip all these caregivers of all ages, young and old, beyond, in providing this psychoeducation? That means helping them, understand these skills, and how do you build strengths in people?
And I think this is applied to everyone because, psychoeducation, it could be also related to psychosocial education.
Yeah.
Anyone?
I mean, to start, I think that we should start upstream. So teach this in school. That's the best place to start. Why are we learning so much maths and stuff? Honestly, we should learn a little bit about health.
Yes.
and a bit more about health than we currently have.
True. So I think that term itself, psychosocial education, right? So I think we just have to understand who we are as humans and let people express their emotions, express their failure in a space where they feel safe in. So one of the things we've started doing recently is a community theatre project. Not recently, 5 years we've been doing the community theatre project. It is really to get the youth and children to participate and share their stories as real as it can get. And from there, they actually come up with performances. First, it's internally for their own community, and when it gets really good, or when they feel that they're brave enough, then it can be staged elsewhere. So we've staged in the Esplanade, we've staged at the substation. And what it does, community theatre, is really for the participants themselves to be able to air what they are feeling, what they've experienced, how they've been seen, and then for the community around them to also be a part of it, because they themselves may be reflecting from it what they are affected by. And then the audience members, when you stage it in a place like the Esplanade, all of them are able to participate in the lives of those who have experienced it and who are sharing it. So to me, that is not education in a formal classroom setting, but it's actually imbibing from each other, you know, like what would I do if I'm there? Actually, many years ago, we didn't have enough to eat. And now this youth is telling me what role can I play in that? So it's I think it's really expanding the issue that all of us are part of the solution to whatever problem that you're seeing. So I think that's a very natural way it must be done, and in schools, for sure.
And then while we're waiting for the school curriculum to catch up with what we need to do as an imperative, we can then focus on, you know, what can we learn from a crisis? What can we learn from a failure? What can we learn from a setback in our life? And I think that's the important thing about having the right, I think I like the word coach that Daniel brought up. So I think there are many people in our lives that have changed our paths, you know, have shaped how we sort of develop or grew up in life. And I think there needs to be these coaches in our lives, whether they are teachers, social workers, or even doctors, or perhaps just a parent. And I think what the parent needs to do is not just to whip them to get good grades, but rather be the child's personal coach, if it's a child we're talking about. If you're a supervisor, you should not be sort of whipping people to get KPIs for the next quarter, but rather to be a coach to bring the best out from your subordinates. And you'll realize your annual, you know, indicators will actually spike if your people are actually discovering their own capacity to perform beyond their expectations. I think it's applicable everywhere. When you see a failure or when you see something actually drop, actually study it and use this approach that you are promoting right now, and you might actually see things multiply.
And in along the line, right, the best time to build strength is before the problem happens.
Certainly, but you know, problems always happens when we least expect it. So sometimes it is also good to just imagine that there are problems anyway in your life. Which one of you has no problems? It's always there. And certainly we would love to prevent it, but you know, despite the best of intentions, I might walk out from this room and discover tomorrow that I have incurable cancer. It just happens. I mean, life just deals with us all kinds of unpredictable sort of paths or trajectories and all that. So I think it's important for us to then be able to bring the right, I want to use this word right now, attitude to how we face life itself, with all its mishmash of problems and the colorful things that happen in our life and scary things that also come along once in a while. And if you can bring that right attitude, I think it is a good start.
I think that's quite a very interesting point, and all of you all brought up the point about going upstream, right? So now this question is for Po Heng, right? So April asked, you know, because Singaporeans, because now
April, we can bring the question up. Yes.
So we have talked about upstream, but April asked, because you deal mostly with older clients, right? Singaporeans seems to find it hard to express their inner thoughts and emotions, right? So how do you have to do a lot of guessing work and try to extract these thoughts and emotions from older patients?
Okay.
Right.
So thanks for the question, April. I think what I'd like to say is maybe two things. One is you are not hearing it from the person you're hoping to speak to, maybe because that person thinks you're not quite ready to hear the answer. So a lot of my clients, they kind of size us up to see, are you ready to listen to what I'm going to say? And I think this happens to between the patient and their loved ones. So if a daughter is not quite ready to accept that the father is going to die, because the father really knows the daughter very well, the father would never open this kind of conversation with the daughter at all, right? So then the other thing is about guessing. I think as Asians, we tend to be quite conservative in the way we speak about majority of things. We are not explicit. We have to read between the lines, don't we? Most of the time. So I think it's about spending time. So it's very surprising. I like to say that, you know, in the course of doing my work, right, I surprise many daughters and sons of the older patients I meet by discovering a lot of family history, legacy, and all kinds of maybe dark things just within a 2-hour visit. That the daughter never imagined the dad to say. So I think it is about bringing the attitude and have the patience to spend that time. And most importantly, yet another thing I want to introduce here, the presence in an encounter or a conversation that you're having with another person, and just wait patiently for that person to bring out whatever the person is ready or things you are ready to listen to, and just let the magic happen. So I think this is the lesson I learned, doing years of this work, having very intimate conversations with my clients.
Okay. So just making time and giving that safe space for your client to be ready to share. And in your work, do you think it's difficult to kind of have your clients share emotions with you?
My work,
Yeah.
all the time. They're sharing emotions. As a psychiatrist, I call myself a feelings doctor, just as a guy. But I think generally, people tend not to. One of the first things that I always say is not about what is the medical problem.
Yeah.
What's the etiology or cause of it, and what other problems we need to consider. I think the key thing is, who is this person before you? What is this person about? I always ask all my trainees, you don't tell me about all the symptoms, because that's what anyone can do,
Yeah.
Just tell me who this person is. What's the background? Where do they, for me, it's what school they go to, how's their family like, where they live. The genogram that Ranga talks about is important because it gives us a sense of who this person is. And as they tell us their stories, their narratives, it gives us a sense of connection. Part of the key, I think, is relationships. That's very real for all of us here in this world. As humans, we need to relate, and I think the relationship is so important. And it's without you just don't have to see a doctor, but if you have a relationship with someone in your most severe pain, that relationship strengthens and helps you.
Yes. And I think it's a process.
Yeah.
It's definitely a process. And what Boeing has touched on is actually space, right? So you don't force people to answer in a way that, what you want to hear, but it's really the space. So if we create enough safe spaces for people to share, it may not be you directly they share with. Actually, they may share with somebody else who's there, and then they create the opportunity for them to tell you directly. So as long as you don't place this unequal relationship with them, that you are somebody professional, knows more, and then they are, like a one down position, you have to work in a way that you are in the same space. Actually, I think many professionals, we have never lived the lives of the people that we work with, right? So actually to learn from them. So we often say that the professional must be the one down. So you're learning from the people who've experienced these issues on their own. And that's where peer support comes in. I think the peer support groups, are extremely important. Like we have a group called Narcotics Anonymous that works there. So if I've never been an addict, I will never know what recovering addict is going through. But if you have fellow recovering addicts, then you have a common space. And then you can share the most difficult experiences without feeling shamed. So the safe space is important to cultivate.
Yeah. So we talk about how do we build strength, how do we bring out emotions. At the end of the day, at the core of it, right, you need to build relationships, you need to build trust, you need to give people the time, the safe space. So all these are very important, and we are very mindful of time now. And why don't we? I was just thinking, right? Let's go back to we talk quite a number of things. We talk about a strength-based approach. We talk about the difference between mental health conditions and mental health itself, and the need to go upstream. We talk about education. I hope someone from education, the sector, is listening in as well. The importance of teaching psychosocial, emotional education really upstream, and the importance of playing more, the importance of failure, importance of fun, family, friends, and not just only treating the condition itself, but a more holistic approach. Can we do something to our, cognitive of mind and our heart as well? So we touched a number of things, right? And if I were to ask our guests here, let's go back to that question. What is a life worth living? And we juxtapose it against this rising mental health condition, would you give our audience here one takeaway, something close to your heart? Anyone?
Maybe I start first. Don't label yourself and don't label others. Open your eyes, look at people, participate, enjoy your life so you can be there for others. Yeah.
Okay. We're all going to summarize it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you 3 R's, okay? So I think a life needs role models, and especially for children, young people, be a role model for your children. Then set up rules and routines that make life worth living. We all have rules, the country has laws, the home, the family has rules, and we need those rules. That's a Chinese saying. And then finally, which is what I'm talking about, is this relationship. I think at the end of the day, after all that you've lived your life, the most important thing is the relationships that you have. So treasure those relationships.
Okay, let's make things a little bit simpler. Life is precious. Believe in yourself. Love yourself more.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us today for Beyond the Labour Fest and this panel, What Makes Life Worth Living. And I hope that you get a lot of good takeaways and insights. If you have any comments, just keep it coming and have a great night. And remember the 4 F's, right? That, friends, family, it is time now to spend with them, have some little fun. And Daniel, would you end up with the last F for us?
Look forward to your future.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.